baby, hipper than a hippopotamus. It is the Sixers Talk podcast brought to you by Wilmington University. Wilmu Works, Danny Pommells, Noah Levick coming to you live from Rivers Casino right here on Delaware Avenue. Bet Rivers, the not as full as it was last week when we were here on MLK Day. Everyone was off from work, but nonetheless, still the frivolity in the air. People feeling good after the Eagles win. The guards at the front stopped me on the way in to talk a little birds, and man, what a great time it is to be a Philly sports fan, Noah. How you feeling?
I'm feeling fine. Yeah,
okay.
Feeling good as usual, I guess. But definitely the 38-7 element of it is hard to wrap your head around. Just the probability of that happening on the same day that it did. And I was there back in the day when the Eagles beat the Vikings, so that was a cool memory for sure. That went to the surface for a lot of people after the Birds blew out the Giants. And the Eagles are the talk of the town, but the Sixers are also playing quite well these days. So definitely, feel where you're coming from with that sentiment. Yeah.
The second best team in the Eastern Conference are the 76ers at 30-16, a 5-0 West Coast road trip. And I got one little tidbit for people out there that will tie the whole thing together with the Eagles and the Sixers and the whole bit, because we were in the media dining room of last week, or the week before last, actually, leading up in the bye week. The Eagles weren't playing before the Giants game, and everyone knew the Giants had won. There was one member of the Sixers media that is a really big Giants fan that was talking super heavy. Am I wrong, Noah?
You're not wrong.
Okay, he was talking super heavy to anyone that was within earshot and taking on a bunch of Eagles fans and talking all types of smack. And ha, your team lost. I won't say who the media member is, but nonetheless, we are entering a really cool space where the Eagles will go to the Super Bowl, most likely, in my eyes. And pitchers and catchers report for Phillies February 16th. The All-Star break is 17th to the 19th. So it's like all this great Philly stuff happening at the same time. Temple beat the number one team in the country. The vibes are high right now, Noah. And it's particularly with the Sixers, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
and a little shout out also, the Rider Bronx picked up a tight win. I've adopted them a little bit thanks to our great Flyers guy Jordan Hall. So
our producer been very like, who? Like,
yeah, right.
So
the great
Rider alone.
Rider, strong tradition there, and I was tuned into that one. So yeah, lots of W's in the Philly sports area landscape these days.
Yeah, a lot of fun happening. These 76ers, man, what a great game to watch here against Sacramento. Frustrating at times when they go down 21, but they mount the comeback in an amazing way because they do it without Joel Embiid and James Harden for the finale of this contest. Tobias Harris ends up fouling out in foul trouble. So they were really shorthanded, particularly down the stretch. But listen, I know Doc Rivers talked about these three starting lineups, the way Montrezl Harrell looked, depending on the matchup, particularly against Domantas Sabonis, was really encouraging. That three-guard triumvirate of Melton, and Maxey looked great out there together, and just a lot of heart and determination on display as the Sixers, took care of business. And so much heart and determination that one of the most imposing forces probably in NBA history out on the floor, Kevin Garnett, felt the need to chime in to say Tyrese Maxey is one of them ones and just show a lot of love. Maybe it was that 11-0 run Maxey had by himself in the third quarter that provoked him coming out and saying that. But just a lot of good vibes around the Sixers team, as I mentioned, second in the East.
Yeah, this was a pretty impressive way to wrap up the trip. You can understand exercising a little caution with the two stars and trying to buy them a good extended stretch of rest here, because the next game for the Sixers isn't until Wednesday against the Nets.
Ooh.
But a lot to like about the comeback effort. I think obviously Tyrese Maxey, as you touched on, but Shake Milton continuing to come up large when the Sixers need a run-stopping bucket or they need someone to stabilize the game a little bit. Just has the ability to create shots for himself in the mid-range. And the Sixers three guards also, combined to go 14 for 15 from the foul line, which was huge. And every point mattered in this game, including a long, not sure he called it, bank from Daniel House Jr.
before the
Uh,
halftime buzzer. Yeah,
yes, and then he had a more
I
conventional
thought you
one.
were going to mention Maxey's logo shot, but
Yeah, that was another long one,
yeah,
and did not need the backboard's assistance, but definitely a win that I think showcased the Sixers' depth and their resilience. They just believe in themselves in these situations, and now have a decent track record of performing well without their stars. 8-4 without Joel Embiid. Montrezl Harrell, indeed, very efficient, 7 for 8 from the floor. We don't have to, go into depth on the airball free throw. And Paul Reed, I think was 4 for 6 from the floor. And both those guys just out hustling the Kings in a lot of
sometimes that's what it's
situations.
all about, man. Just the
Yeah.
effort and energy, man. The things you can't teach, those intangibles.
Yeah, the grit. I mean, the Sixers, I think, fell down 21 in large part because the Kings were shooting at an unsustainably hot rate. So,
Oh my God, Harrison Barnes was on
yeah,
fire.
yeah, he was white hot, and I think sure the Sixers improved their defensive effort and were a little more disruptive, but yeah, a lot of it was just scrapping for extra possessions, being a little smarter with the basketball themselves. And sure enough, Tyrese Maxey is someone who can wipe away deficits very quickly. The 3-point shooting has still been a little bit up and down since his return from injury, but
You
I
could see
think,
his legs were under him though in
yes.
this last Sacramento game because he was flying up and down the floor, and of course, he's going so fast, but those finesse finishes when he's going full speed and still laying it off the glass and falling into the stands as he does it.
And like it's rare also that you see him get his shot blocked, and much of the time he is tossing in these runners and these floaters either over a 7-footer or just before it's contested. So yeah, there's a lot of craftiness to his game to complement just the elite speed. Of course, the Sixers saw another especially speedy guy in De'Aaron Fox and did have some trouble with him, and again didn't necessarily turn in a sterling defensive effort, but the offensive execution was just really sharp when it needed to be. George Niang passed 100 made threes on the season, knocked down a couple of big ones. And yeah, I think just we had this vision heading into the year of the Sixers as a team that could absorb some difficulties with injuries and foul trouble and what have you. And more that is coming to fruition, which is cool to see. And indeed has vaulted them to number 2 in a very tight Eastern
I
Conference.
think it was Tyrese Maxey who shared the funny anecdote that George Niang was checking into the game, and Doc Rivers was like, "You ready to shoot tonight, George?" And George is like, I don't know. He's like, "What?" He's like, "Nah, coach, I'm just joking."
Yeah.
And he goes in and nails a three.
That they have a very fun banter. I think, Yang, some banter and trash talk is inevitable, but on Christmas Day as well, I think Rivers tried to fire him up and was letting him hear it when he had a slow shooting start to that game. Said, are you going to play tonight, George? Going to make some shots? And um, George Niang was actually, pointing at Doc Rivers at Madison Square Garden, not a Knicks fan in the front row. It was his own head coach who he wanted to be sure, was aware that he was knocking down jumpers. So yeah, he's a fun guy to have aboard, but I don't think that should obscure also just that he is a downright special shooter, at least this season. And it's not fluky. He's been consistently over 40% year after year, and the volume's really high this year, and there's some variety to it as well. You've seen on this West Coast trip, he's making many of the catch and shoot attempts, but he's got that little quick pump fake and then sidestep to his game, and has added a little nuance to his 3-point package, as well as surprise teams, I think, at times with his driving ability and, again, his craftiness, which is much different than Tyrese Maxey's, but still effective at times. So, yeah, a valuable piece for the Sixers off the bench, and they've got quite a few of those, which is definitely cool to see, and I think comes to the fore, of course, when the stars are out. Yeah.
You talk about the mentality and just the camaraderie between coach and players and between the players. I think that was so evident. The Sixers Twitter account tweeted out like a 2-minute video of the coaches having like a high five line leading up to the visiting locker room after the Sacramento win, and the players coming off the court through that, assistant coaches, Doc Rivers and whatnot, and just the way they were excited and celebrating the 5-0 road trip, and not just the guys who contributed, Maxey, Niang, Milton, Melton, all those guys, Reed, Harold, Daniel House, a guy who has a couple of DNP CDs, hasn't gotten the rotation minutes maybe he had earlier in the season, but he comes in this game and, like you said, hits that half court three at the buzzer, and the guys are waiting for him, high five and laughing. When he's coming off the court, he hits another big three later in the second half. But he coming off the court, just the way he was excited and the way everyone was engaged, it's just fun to watch for us, but it shows the interconnectivity. You know what I'm saying? How, much these guys are all, of one mind and headed in the same direction. So those are little things, nuances that I love and enjoy, to watch and pick up on.
Definitely. Yeah. I think it's always fun when you're winning, but it's been the case here for a while.
And these are hard fought wins. They got
Yes.
2 1-point wins on the road trip, a 2-point win in Sacramento. Portland was a blowout, but these were tight victories.
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely some tests. And I think even when the Sixers weren't doing so well, you could see that these guys enjoy each other's company and they have fun when others are successful. With House, I mean, Matisse Thybulle told a story of as early as training camp, he was going up to him after practices and shooting with him and, being an encouraging presence and someone who wanted to just be a positive influence and pass along some knowledge. And certainly you don't sense any jealousy or any spite about these moments when House isn't playing very much,
Right.
and Matisse Thybulle is preferred justifiably. I think he doesn't look at it as, oh, this guy shouldn't be taking my minutes. Sure, he's disappointed, but he's genuinely happy when Matisse Thybulle takes an open look or Thybulle does his thing defensively. So yeah, those little intangibles and chemistry factors, they have been, I think, positive for the Sixers, honestly, throughout the season, and they all look even brighter when they're actually winning games. But some good stuff going on behind closed doors, and you occasionally get a glimpse of it. But I think, yeah, it's been impactful for the Sixers.
And it's genuine. You think it's genuine? Yeah,
definitely is. Yeah. I mean, chemistry is, I think, a tough thing to put your finger on, and the mix of personalities here does seem to be working. I think Joel Embiid is a little more reserved as a leader, and the team has tried to bring him out of his shell at times. PJ Tucker was on that right away, asking him to actually talk in practices and, be an active communicator defensively. But honestly, Embiid doesn't need to be a demanding, in-your-face sort of guy. I think he can play a natural role here, and PJ Tucker is always going to share his 2 cents. And I think some of these maybe quirkier personalities like a Harrell and a House have worked well in this locker room. They're supporting some of the youngsters. I think the dynamic with Harrell and Reed seems to be a good one, where Paul Reed, I think, admires some of Montrezl Harrell's grit and how he's always a tough guy to go against in practice, and again, doesn't really carry that jealousy, in these situations where he's not playing. So some interesting guys in this locker room, and they enjoy each other's company and they enjoy winning games together.
Does it bother you at all that a lot of these wins the Sixers have racked up over the last, month and a half, not a lot of them have come against teams they're going to face in the postseason? So they played the Knicks, Indiana, possible postseason opponents, but a lot of the teams, are West Coast teams that they faced. Does that bother you at all? Would you have wanted, of course, big test coming up on Wednesday with Brooklyn coming to town, but would you have hoped that they were playing teams in the Eastern Conference and winning some of these games?
Well, yeah, I think the next month or so will be telling, and the Sixers schedule will become more challenging. But obviously, you can't count that against them, and they just got to play who's in front of them. I did think the Portland win was a very strong one.
Mm-hmm.
I know they let the foot off the gas a little bit and didn't have a great finish, but man, the defense in that first half, sure, some of it's Damian Lillard missing the occasional open shot, but I thought across the board, that was a reminder that they are capable of being an elite defensive team. And yeah, it's been a little bumpy, a little up and down, but the ability to close these games with victories, yeah, I'm not gonna count that against them at all. I think it's all wins are generally pretty good ones, and yeah, now some interesting games coming up. If they can keep on winning, that'll be even a little more impressive.
Hey, we're brought to you by Wilmington University. Learn how you can save time and tuition dollars with Wilmington University Dual Credit Advantage. Go to wilmu.edu/dual credit. And of course, we are coming to you here from Rivers Casino. Thanks for tuning in with us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you are seeing us right now or listening. And of course, Rivers, it's time to rush to new rewards at Rivers Casino. Now there's a whole new way for you to earn, redeem, and level up your rewards. Get your new Rush Rewards card and get more out of your game at Rivers Casino, Philadelphia. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. So it's an interesting time for these 76ers. And I love when, I mentioned how tight the Eastern Conference race is, but I love, moments, as I mentioned, when Kevin Garnett, just a national media member, and NBA Hall of Famer, just someone who has a broader scope of the NBA, chimes in, unsolicited on the team, like he did with Maxey, giving him some props. Maxey just, I don't know. I was going to go back and count, but I never did. But he probably had like 8 shots that were like halfway down and came out in that Sacramento game. Not to mention that personal 11-0 run he went on in the third quarter against them. And my favorite part about that was the fact that Mike Brown tried to call a timeout after Maxey hit like 2 buckets in a row to kind of like calm it down. And right out of the timeout, Maxey just nails a 3, like take that. So I just really enjoyed that. But something that has caught the eye of a lot of Sixers fans is a recent Sports Illustrated article where one of Joel Embiid's idols, Hakeem Olajuwon, talked about in the article the death of the post up. And he's commenting on current NBA big men, and he had a lot of praise for the reigning MVP, Nikola Jokic, not so much for Joel Embiid. And he's really harped on the fact that Joel Embiid settles, in his eyes, by shooting jump shots and three-pointers specifically, instead of scoring closer to the basket where he has a clear size advantage. And Jokic, he lauds because he feels like Jokic has very, post moves, gets deep post position, and it's hard to tell with the way he plays with his shot fakes and whatnot if he's going to shoot, if it is an actual pump fake, or he kind of keeps the defender off balance in a way. And a lot of people felt like that was a slight on Joel. I thought it was a pretty honest criticism, to be honest. Adam Herman on our website does a great job outlining why Olajuwon is off base, just based on the numbers, and how Embiid has improved closer to the basket over the last several years. And him and Jokic's numbers are closer than you might think, particularly on three-point attempts and other things like that. But I just feel like if we're going to criticize a guy like Ben Simmons for not using his physical attributes and, not give him credit for it, like discredit him for things that he doesn't take advantage of. In a similar way, you can do the same thing for Joel. And we all have, if you're being honest, thought at times that Joel maybe settled for a 3, or, is going 3-point line to 3-point line instead of rim to rim. And that he could be, scoring closer to the basket or establishing himself there. But as Adam pointed out in the article, and I thought was a little bit weak on Olajuwon not to notice, is the amount of fouls that Joel draws, which I really think separates him from other big men out there who may just shoot threes. But what were your thoughts on that, and what did you pick up on from that, those comments he made?
Yeah, I agree. There's some validity to the criticism, but I do think Joel Embiid, unfortunately, people have these not preconceived notions of him, but they're stuck with the image of who he was previously, and perhaps not giving him credit for some of the improvements
Are
he
you saying
has.
he's evolved a bit?
Well, I mean, I think just the point of he settles for 3-pointers because he's tired, that would have been pretty spot on maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I don't really think it's accurate right now. And I do think this year in particular, a lot of his success has come at the nail, and that's just very good, efficient offense for the Sixers. And I don't think something that's wrong with his or the Sixers' approach to the game, quite honestly. Also, I mean, in recent years, he was leading the NBA in post ups per game, and clearly is still one of the more physical big guys in the league and one of the players who's capable of physical dominance. I don't think he at all shies away from contact, or it's a negative that he has developed, Kobe Bryant, Dirk Nowitzki as skills and become so good at them that they are sometimes perhaps more efficient than trying to post up and facing double teams and being unable to score efficiently from those positions. So I think in many ways, Joel Embiid has been smart about blending old school and new school elements of his game. And I think perhaps that is a little overlooked by some folks. I thought all the praise of Nikola Jokic was certainly valid. And I don't think every discussion needs to be why Embiid or Jokic is better.
A comparison.
Yeah,
Yeah.
although that will, bubble up again here with those two matching up in Philly soon. But
Hopefully,
hopefully, yeah,
we
good health from
anticipated.
both parties. We would
Yeah,
hope, yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, with Embiid, like I get to some extent being frustrated when he takes a three or when he's not, super physical against a smaller player. But I think for the most part, he is very savvy offensively and very smart about knowing how to use his skills that he has worked really hard to develop over the years. Um, I think, sure, you could be hypercritical with anyone and say, oh, that was, an ill advised jump shot, but Embiid's not chucking up 8 threes a game. His bread and butter is the nail right now. He's a great mid range player. He's making the most free throws per game of anyone in the NBA. He is more than willing to post up when that makes sense and is doable, but he's doubled so much that often the nail is the right spot for him to be. I think with Jokic, like post ups are perhaps a stronger option at times just because they're virtuoso passing.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say Joel Embiid is bad in that department, but situations where he's doubled from the post, I think, tend to be less positive for the Sixers than for Jokic. But I get that, Hakeem Olajuwon might be a little disappointed when Joel Embiid does not flex the muscles a ton of the time, but I think that is perhaps a tad too critical, albeit from someone who is an all-time great, a guy Joel Embiid looked up to, etc. I do think it came across a little bit like criticizing a previous version of Joel Embiid.
Yeah, the old heads are always chiming in with their thoughts, and it's funny because he sounds just like Charles and Shaq sound on TNT with a lot of their criticisms of Joel, which they have backed off of because of the way Joel has continued to grow and expand his game. And the dude has touch from the outside. I mean, you gotta, account for that as a defender. So that adds another aspect to his game. And I don't think it's necessarily the death of the post up, which is kind of what the article was addressing. I think coaches will take scorers on all three levels. You know what I'm saying? Efficient scorers on all three levels. I think it's just the speed of the game has changed. So, a guy with their back to the basket, trying to establish themselves and, pound the ball a bunch of times and turn and face. And like it just the flow of the game is different. And that just won't quite jibe with, the tempo. But I liked it where the game is. I think there's definitely things we can all criticize about we would like to change or alter or whatnot. But I think a lot of the older players don't necessarily uh, uh, embrace the newer style of play, which is I think where a lot of his criticism came from. But I'm happy with the way Joel's evolved, particularly as a scorer, because I think that that's the thing that keeps other teams honest when it comes to playing the Sixers is that, well, we know this dude is going to go out here and have 30. How do we slow him down? And then other people can on the Sixers get involved off of that. But
Yeah, no, he's made really intentional, diligent efforts to expand his options. Going back to the disappointing Toronto series in 2019, and I think now with the Sixers, just from a pure entertainment standpoint, when they're really clicking, it's a fun team to watch
oh
offensively. I
man,
mean,
absolutely.
the Harden and Embiid pick and roll just has seemingly infinite options, and I don't think it lacks flair either. I mean, James Harden, manipulates the defense very cleverly, and Embiid, I think, just has so much variety to his game that it is cool to watch those two in tandem. But yeah, the post up does indeed seem to be fading out to some extent, but I don't think interior play will ever entirely go away, right? I mean, close to the basket, most guys are going to be very good at that shot, and it's just a question of how do you get to the rim? And I think increasingly, when teams are just determined to double team star bigs, the back down into the post and find some way to get to the block option is just not going to be very prevalent for many offenses. But it is interesting too. Hakeem Olajuwon acknowledging, back in his day, he did enjoy in the summers when he could be a little more creative and do some of the things that guards did. And I think if he was in today's NBA, that would be encouraged, and he'd probably be really good at a lot of
Right,
that.
and he
So,
would be having fun doing it, just
yeah.
like these guys are. Hey, if you're injured for over 70 years, Lundy Law has been the #1 personal injury law firm in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. Their services are exemplary. Their results are exceptional. Call 1-800-LUNDY-LAW to get the money you deserve. Opioid addiction is a national public health crisis. The Someone You Know podcast from the Independence Blue Cross Foundation offers inspiring stories that challenge stigma, offer hope, and humanizes the disease of addiction. Download the new season 3 of Someone You Know on all major podcast platforms. A very interesting time here leading up to the All-Star break for the 76ers. No West Coast action for them until the end of March, back to back with the Warriors and Suns. The 24th and 25th, if I recall correctly. But some important games coming up here, particularly on Wednesday, as Noah mentioned, the Brooklyn Nets come to town. Saturday, it is the Denver Nuggets. And it's interesting because with all that they've had to face, I think we need to give out a little bit of kudos to Doc Rivers for overcoming a lot of the adversity. I see the Doc Rivers hater Ben Barry shaking his head over your shoulder, Noah.
Mm.
But he's dealt with Embiid missing time, Tyrese missing time, Harden missing time, and here they are, second in the East. Similar to last year, he had to navigate Embiid and the COVID stuff and help them to a strong first half record. Just I gotta give the guy credit, man. I mean, no matter who they face or how, and not just Doc, but the entire coaching staff, because I'm sure they play a gigantic part in that. But the Sixers have overcome a lot of adversity and are here on the high side of it. And as I mentioned, most recently here on this West Coast road trip, tight, close games where situational basketball and who's on the floor, personnel and matchups and things like that. And yeah, a lot of the credit goes to the players on the floor who were playing at an incredible level. Maxey, Harden, Embiid, Milton, Niang, Trez, all those guys. But steady as she goes, Doc Rivers has continued to show that he's up to the task here this season and trying to lead this team to the promised land. And so far, he's done an incredible job. You got to give him credit.
Yeah, I think the flexibility has perhaps exceeded its reputation this year. Certainly, the early returns on Tyrese Maxey as a sometimes six man
Hmm.
were strong, and just mixing up lineups, I think, rather sensibly in most cases. I think with Matisse Thybulle, he's been able to emerge now as an every night guy. Again, an arguable point to, whether he should be featured more, but certainly has risen up the pecking order from where he initially stood. I think the bench unit looks pretty nice now, especially when Tyrese Maxey is part of it. And you do have to give Rivers credit for, even when it wasn't always pretty, I think prioritizing chemistry among some of those players. So, yeah, agreed. He's done good work here. And I think many of the questions about his coaching have always regarded the postseason, but racked up a lot of regular season wins, and that's no fluke. He knows what he's doing, knows how to operate when shorthanded, and I think navigate teams through difficult times. I think even with the backup center situation, like he's perhaps handled that better than
Right.
many expected. When Montrezl Harrell wasn't playing well and didn't justify minutes, Paul Reed got opportunities, and
That's a great example.
Paul Reed hasn't entirely faded from this equation as I think some folks might have worried. Again, there's certainly room for contention about situations where that could have been handled differently, handled better. But you zoom out in the big picture, the Sixers have some backup center options, and I think often the game to game decisions on who to go to, even the half to half decisions, they've been smart. They've worked for the Sixers. They're 8-4 without Joel
Yeah.
Embiid. So just figuring things out when shorthanded, he knows how to do it. I think this year, employing the zone defense quite a lot, in knowing the right situations, the right matchups. I give him a lot of credit for that too. I think it would be tempting to say, "Oh, we've got strong defensive personnel here. We don't need to lean on zone that much." But if you're being realistic, when Montrezl Harrell's on the floor, there's going to be a rim protection drop off, and one decent way to compensate for that much of the time is going to be zone. So, yeah, I think there's just been a lot of logical choices that he's made, and not flawless, but the Sixers have really rebounded nicely from an alarmingly poor start. So I think there's credit deserved there for both the X's and O's adjustments, and then also just this thing could have gone south in a horrific way, and the team did not tune out its coach. They were listening to what he had to say, and at least to the extent that they got back on track a little. They found the 500 mark, and then I think discovered their identity and how exactly to best mesh all the talent here. So, yeah, agreed. He's done good work, and he will be evaluated quite closely when the postseason rolls around, as
Oh
every
yeah.
coach is. Yeah.
I just gotta, obviously operate in the here and now, and you make some great points, and particularly, I think the fact that guys aren't checked out from not playing significant amount of time, like Daniel House, you mentioned Trez, and they were trying to figure out how he fit in the rotation and with what group. And while they weren't playing, while they weren't getting enough minutes, you that would be a perfect time for them to sulk or hunch their shoulders or whatever. But instead, when they get in the game, they're still checked in and you know carrying the professionalism that the role requires. And that is a credit to the coaching staff to me, because even though you're not playing, you're still engaged because of the opportunity that will be coming. So it's just trust, connection, understanding how people work and things like that. So I just think that is something that they deserve credit for as well. But
Yeah, I think Doc Rivers sometimes has patted himself on the back for fostering culture, and it's rung hollow if you're talking after a devastating postseason loss or something along those lines.
or
But
taking the whole team to South Carolina, or
yeah, no, I mean that was good stuff.
right.
But yeah, I think people would understandably focus more on the tangibles and some of the X's and O's miscues that
Mhm.
he has made. But to your point, like the team culture does seem to be strong here. They have a good time, but they also certainly do not lack seriousness. And the veterans, I think, set a standard in that regard, but so does the head coach. With like when you're in the game, you got to know what your role is, you got to know your personnel, and you've got to check off these various boxes to help us win games and embrace whatever your job may be. So, yeah, we don't want to excessively pump Doc Rivers up for regular season wins because the main goal is deep playoff success. That's his goal as well. But also, credit is warranted. I definitely agree with you. I think he's overall done a nice job this season. Again, not a perfect job, but is doing a nice job coaching a team that has suffered some sustained injuries. I mean, Tyrese Maxey missing 15-ish games, ditto for James Harden. And the Sixers, sure, the depth plays a role in them doing okay in those spots, but again, so does the coaching. And yeah, it would not be fair to only fixate on Doc Rivers when he does something dubious, with a rotation. Like, yeah, he's coaching a 30-16 team right now, which I think seemed improbable to many folks after they started 0-3, and the effort was unacceptable early in the season.
We're coming in for a landing here in the Sixers Talk podcast. But before we go, I mentioned the All-Star break coming up in the Ides of February. Noah, you have a cool article on the website on Delaware Bluecoats high flyer Matt McClung. And Mac is a member of the NBA's 2023 Utah All-Star game experience. 2022 Utah All-Star game experience. 2022-23 season. He'll be at the All-Star experience in the dunk contest. Tell us about that a little bit before we get out of here.
Yeah, so he, I guess, was told to not officially confirm that quite yet, but yeah, there was, The Athletic reported that he will be participating, and he sure was talking like someone who expects to be there. But he's an exciting guy. I think he's got some name recognition back to his high school days where he broke Allen Iverson's single season scoring record. And he said, he still got, love for Iverson and saw him as an inspiration growing up. He's a 6'2" guy who is not physically imposing at all. I think he looks like an NFL corner, build wise, but he's got serious bounce. He's 43, 44-inch vertical, and he's got some creativity and some flair in the air, and I think that should be fun to see. I think it's intriguing also whether he can carve out a spot for himself in the NBA, but no one has any questions that this guy is a legit dunker, and he, I think, has a chance to win this thing. We'll see exactly what the full pool is.
What the field is, yeah.
But yeah, like going back to the high school days, he's doing between the legs and behind the back.
Do your YouTube and your Google searches.
Yeah,
if you're not familiar.
I think any criticism of him being unworthy of the spot strictly on his dunking, I disagree with that. Right. I think this guy does deserve to be there. As far as like his NBA prospects, needs to show that he can hold his own defensively. That he can facilitate adequately, and clearly has some question marks there that he's trying to answer, and trying to develop his game with the Bluecoats. But man, his dunking is fun, and I think it'll be a cool little part of the All-Star experience. And I expect Allen Iverson will be tuning in. Maybe we'll get one of those old head legend kind of tweets, respecting Mac McClung's dunking. He said, he's trying to invent some unique dunks here and put them on display for the NBA world to see.
Hopefully he doesn't take 16 tries to get his dunks down.
He did say that. He said, hopefully I just make the dunks. Okay. So I think that's actually smart. I think that's a mature approach. You don't want to necessarily, take the air out of the balloon by being a little too audacious, in my opinion. I definitely take some points off for the guys who need many tries. Yeah.
Hey, we appreciate you listening to the Sixers Talk podcast. Make sure you check out Noah's work on NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com. That article is on the front page of the Sixers portion of the website. And let us know what you think. As always, on social media, join us in the comments here on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. And we appreciate you, as always, for Noah Levick, Ben Berry, and our guy Tom Finer. I'm Danny Pommells. We appreciate you, and we're here from Rivers Casino a couple times a month. Be sure to come check us out if you can. We will see you next time on the Sixers Talk podcast.